in terms of like understanding people, I think user research is the one that psychology helps the most, because it like really, you know that you need to quickly build, the mental model of the person, like what he or she understands, doesn't understand, how they perceive your product, how to not ask leading questions, right? So like that's really important to know that, people have biases, also have biases, so you need to be really careful there. It's hard for us, especially men, to talk about our feelings and, reflect on them. And that's, even when you are like in a safe environment, right? And I assume that in work, talk about your like needs, etc. It's something that like we need to work. I think it really resonates, like I'm having no chills,
Oh,
so
wow.
it's,
Okay.
yeah, I think, when Soviet Union collapsed, right? And I think, like our like parents and the whole generation, they were, for them the go-to approach to like the world, society, work is, like take something from the job. It's not even like stealing, right? Like you don't
Mm-hmm.
even think this way. It's like take something, lie, hustle, don't pay taxes. It was very much embedded, right, into
Mm.
society. And I was growing up and seeing all of this, and for me it was like, no, this is wrong. I don't want this.
How are you feeling?
Good, a little bit excited, but yeah,
Yeah.
pleasure of being here.
Only a little bit excited.
It's, I'm trying to contain my feelings.
Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, welcome on the Happy Developer podcast.
Okay, happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. So, my usual question nowadays is just to allow the presenter to present themselves, just how they see themselves, how they see their experience. So, who do you think Hades is? Mm.
Okay, that's a tough question for me to answer. But now currently I'm heading the product guild here in Lithuania at Wix. So it's something that sometimes is hard to explain to the outsiders, because first I need to explain what the product managers do, and then I can proceed to my to explaining my role. So product manager is the one who's trying to solve user problems with the help of developers, and we have a bunch of them. And we in Wix are also trying for each of group of people, like designers, product managers, front end developers, etc., to have their own sort of guild, so that we can also make sure that we share best practices, we learn how to do our work well. But we're still in the team, we're like very in a sense like full stack team, right? Like we have product manager, designer, etc. So I'm heading the guild part to make sure that we share the best practices amongst each other, meaning product managers. So yeah, I'm now doing this in Lithuania.
Okay. So that's the working part of Adas. What about the outside work? Who is
Okay,
Adas
so
outside the guild master
yes,
role?
I'm a husband and I'm father of a 2-year old.
Okay.
So yeah, that's me. And yeah, I would say that that's probably my work-life balance description. Like I have a work that I'm really proud of, and also have a
Hmm.
family that I'm proud of. So I think I kind of nailed the balance right.
Okay, I see. I see. And for those who don't know or maybe haven't read the description, you also have a bachelor's degree in psychology, right?
I do, yeah. That's an interesting fact about me, and a bit maybe unusual in the field. But
Hmm.
the more I think about it, like I'm not the only psychologist here in Wix who's working on the product. So yeah, maybe it's not actually that of an exception. So
Do you think psychology is a typical path for a product manager, or is it more on the outlier side? What do you think?
So initially, I thought that it's maybe a bit unusual,
Hmm.
but now that I'm thinking, I'm not the only one who has background in psychology from around here, and I think it's probably one of the better studies to have to work with to work as a product manager, because it has some very good like it gives you like very good fundamentals to do your work well. Actually, I remember talking with one of my colleagues from Israel. She also graduated psychology, and she told me that it's very common in Israel to pick psychology as as a very good starting point for your career, because it's like the best social science kind of a
Mm.
thing. And I was actually surprised how open they were to think that this way. Because in Lithuania, if you're studying psychology, maybe you want to be like a psychotherapist, right? Or maybe you want
Mm.
to be like an organizational psychologist, but it's not something that you typically pick as a general field that you want to study. And she also
Mm.
shared this argument that psychology has like the biggest amount of credits for statistics among other social fields. And now that I think about it, like that's a part that's definitely was helpful to understand
Mm.
A/B testing, right? Because essentially it's a classical experiment, that product managers are running. So, and also like thinking about this construct that you cannot observe, but maybe you can measure. Like there are some very good touch points that gives you this like overall fundamental understanding. And
Mm.
I'm actually surprised how many good teachings I had in psychology, and how well they're helping me to become a better product manager.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And if I remember correctly, you were one of the how to say best graduates, not only in psychology but maybe in general, which makes me think that you were probably taking very seriously your studies. And if I remember correctly as well, you even enrolled in organizational psychology for a while, but then dropped out for some reason. So it seems that
Mm.
product management was never on your radar when you were studying psychology.
No, so first of all, I didn't even know such a role existed, right?
Yeah.
So it's also fairly new in Lithuanian market. I would say that I remember that, yeah, like you said, some things at school were like I did some really well, and chemistry was one of them. So I was
Mm.
naturally pushed to maybe think about biochemistry. But then I thought, okay, I don't want to spend my life in the lab. Maybe medicine, but I was worried that I love all the after class activities. So I thought, okay, maybe that's not going to be helpful to study long hours for medicine. So maybe economy, maybe politics. So I sort of
Mm.
ended up with a general field. But I also decided to go to psychology because I remember one of my friends. He he was sort of like a wannabe businessman. Like that's how we all thought of him. But he actually applied to become a pilot, and I was surprised. And I asked you, like, why are you applying there if you, like, everyone knows you're going to be a businessman? And he told me that what I want to study and what I want to do in my life aren't necessarily the same thing. So,
Mm.
and I
Exactly.
took his advice and decided to study psychology, simply because I thought, okay, I don't mind studying it, and like that definitely looks interesting. And never actually regretted studying it, even though I never thought that I'm going to be a psychotherapist or
Yes.
somebody like. Yeah, actually, I'm trying to think of like what was my plan, and I'm not sure I had one. So
Mm.
yeah.
Which subjects did you like the most?
Uh, Surprising. Okay, so I would say that there were two like broad areas, right? The cognitive psychology, or like cognitive science, because it was wired to the brain, wired to our perception, to like cognitive models, and surprisingly also philosophy. So
Mm.
that was also very. I would say that, yeah, we probably the subject that I enjoyed the most was history of philosophy by Vytautas Radžvilas. He's a
Mm-hmm.
bit prominent figure, but his lectures were like captivating. 3 hours straight. You could just listen, and that was the best exercise and challenge for your brain. But also somehow every time you left the audience, you felt that somehow you got smarter, before
Mm.
compared to before you entered it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, the third probably subject was also social cognition. So that
Mm.
was something that I had a course on when I was abroad in Singapore for the exchange program, but that was also, kind of cognitive science applied to the social layer. I think that was
Mm.
also very interesting to see how this is uh, being researched with a scientific perspective.
Mm.
Like it's again, psychology is a very, in a sense, fluid field, right? Like we are trying to apply all the like strict scientific methods, but also we are, a lot of the subjects are psychology students, so we need to be careful about the conclusions. But nonetheless, the let's say the practice of trying to unravel the truth is something that you sort of leave the studies with you. Like
Mm.
you always seek for the truth, even though you know that you might be a little bit biased.
And that the truth might be subjective, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine that being a product manager is definitely one of those roles where by talking to many stakeholders due to your job, you get to know how people think, and especially you get to be entangled in various power dynamics. So
Hmm.
I can guess that those theoretical understandings that you got from your undergrad might might be helpful in navigating that whole world. What do you think about it?
So I hope so. It's always hard to say, whether there
Mm,
was any better field, that if
mm,
I had studied, I would have been, I don't know, achieved more, like made some better decisions,
yeah, sure.
as a product manager. But I think this awareness, right, about people having different context, priorities, different understandings, I think that that definitely helps. I think the biggest, in terms of like understanding people, I think user research is the one that psychology helps the most, because it like really i- that you need to quickly build the mental model of the person, like what he or she understands, doesn't understand, how
Mm,
they perceive your product, how to not ask leading questions, right? So like that's really important to know, that people have biases, also have biases, so you need to be really careful there. But I would say that, yeah, in terms of stakeholder management, it's also something that I think everyone who's graduated psychology thinks a little bit more about those kind of things. And maybe it's not necessarily like specific topics, or I don't know, tricks that you learn
okay.
in your fields, but it's this constant practice, right, of maybe reflecting a little bit more, that
Mm,
helps you grow, in your role. So I wouldn't say that psychology per se is, teaching you, like how to read the people better, but it's more about practicing this kind of awareness, of reflecting, which
mm,
you can do not necessarily by graduating psychology.
sure.
Yeah.
What I can add maybe is because I also studied psychology and I am a practicing psychologist,
Mhm.
but I also work with tech companies. So, what I really found useful due to my psychological background is understanding the core needs that people have.
Mhm.
That, for example, every one of us needs love, everyone needs acceptance. We want to achieve some things and we
Mhm.
want our people to be proud of. And I also realized that when these needs are frustrated, we might, how to say, become aggressive. We
Mhm.
might seek power with Machiavellian ways without thinking
Yeah.
about the consequences. So, having this context in mind, it definitely helps to empathize with people and realize that, okay, this person might be frustrated for one way or another, which
Mhm.
is why this person is behaving this way and not this way.
Yeah.
And I'm still looking for ways how to help clients navigate these questions at work because it's kind of deep
Mhm.
aspects of relationships. But I realize that, yeah, these dynamics are happening, but people are struggling to talk about these dynamics. And I think in my world, at least how I try to live my life, I try to be transparent about my needs. And
Mhm.
I sometimes, when I think about an ideal corporate world, I think if people were more aware about their needs, even frustrated needs,
Mhm.
and they were explicit about that, I think it would be much easier to have discussions because then you would be able to differentiate what is going on, whether we're actually talking about matter of
Mhm.
fact things, okay, product features, blah
Mhm.
blah blah, or actually are we in a different frequency?
Yeah.
uh,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so definitely agree with you. And the two things that sort of resonated with me. So I'm participating in this. I'm not even sure how to call it. So it's like a program for men. It's called Tribes, Gentis in Lithuanian,
Yes.
and the the guys, the men are gathering, in groups, and we're, talking about things in our lives, and and one of the like clear observation that I witness is that it's hard for us, especially men, to talk about our feelings and reflect on them. And that's even when you are like in a safe environment, right? And I assume that in work, talk about your like needs, etc. It's something that like we need to work on. It's not.
Mm.
I'm not sure whether it doesn't come natural or that's something, some inheritance that maybe we're taking, from Soviet times or from whatever. But I
Yeah.
definitely see that it we need to do a little bit of more work to really unravel those needs, and also learn how to talk about those needs in a non-aggressive way.
Mm.
And the second, sort of reflection now that you mentioned a few items was, I would say that all of those things maybe resonated more with me when I was a team manager as opposed to being a product manager,
Okay.
because I think that then you like really care about the needs of your people, and you really want to understand, how they feel, and what motivates them. So I think that was maybe the part that I don't know, psychology was a little bit more useful to,
Mm.
when working with your teammates, because then you're in a sense, more responsible for them, right? Like you
Mm.
really need to make sure that they're happy, because it's good for them, good for society, and also good if you want to do a good work. You need to make sure that
Mm.
your team is happy if you want to do it long term, right? Not
Mm.
necessarily for the single deadline that you already have upcoming.
Okay. You also mentioned the importance of philosophy in your studies, and that's definitely a subject that I appreciate myself as well. I may be more interested in ethics or moral philosophy.
Okay.
That's, I guess, my uh, field of focus. And if I remember correctly, that's something that you also studied in your thesis, if I remember, about
Yeah.
ethics.
Yes.
Maybe you can talk about
Thanks for
this more.
asking that. Yeah, like it's not often that I have a chance to mention
Mm.
my thesis, but yeah, like I was very into like moral philosophy or moral psychology, and yeah, actually for my thesis, now I'm trying to remember. So I was testing this idea. So first I had the questionnaire that sort of assessed how people judge certain situations. So it was based on the theory of moral intuitions, that are like five different moral traits, let's say, that we have, and we have different people differ in the way they attribute what's morally like wrong and on those
Mm.
certain areas. So I think one was like causing harm to somebody, and the other one was more about like respecting authority and that natural difference between like Western and Eastern cultures. So I was giving those kind of situations, but I also wanted to prime my subjects on the meta-ethical level, and
Mm.
meta-ethics discusses morality in terms of like what it is, like is it universal, is it subjective. So for one group, I was sort of I asked them to read the passage that discusses that moral things are true or wrong, and they're like objective and exist in the user in the universe. And for the other group, I gave the paragraph that discussed about the morality that is like subjective, and like it depends on the culture and the people and the situation. And then I asked them to make cast those moral judgments on the regular situations. And in some cases, that passage caused a little bit of a difference, right, when making the judgment. So yeah, I was actually proud of those findings. Not that they helped me in any way, probably with my
Sure.
work, but it was an interesting field to study.
Mm. I think that if we have enough time, we will talk about importance of ethics in the product manager's role. I think
Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
these are topics that are not necessarily often discussed together
Hmm.
unless we get into trouble. So you probably remember when the product manager from Facebook made the news about uh, talking about Facebook not sharing their data on how young girls perceive themselves and what is going on in terms of their well-being.
Hmm.
And there were important data points about how this information uh, yeah is not used to the benefit of the users, especially
Hmm.
those young girls who might be suicidal and something like that. And yeah, you probably heard of this, and she basically went on onto news and she get into trouble. Some people
Hmm.
criticize her for doing that, saying that it was unethical to say what she did because she
Hmm.
essentially um, yeah, she breached confidentiality agreements.
Hmm.
So I think that these are definitely related things, but we don't talk about them
Hmm.
very often unless we get into trouble usually.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like.
Okay.
Hmm.
So going back to your background, what do you think, where do you think this interest in psychology and philosophy, this curiosity comes from when you think about your upbringing, your early experiences? If you had to nail down some um, relations between who you are now and who you were as a kid, let's say,
Hmm.
if you had to psychoanalyze yourself, what do you
Yeah, yeah.
think?
I wanted to comment that. Yeah, it's a
Mm.
it's a rather deep question.
Mm.
I would say that I was always very much into like natural sciences. Chemistry, math. Like these were like subjects that went really well for me in school. So yeah, I'm not sure. Like at some point, I probably switched my attention to the social sciences. Because I don't know, maybe it was the adolescence, right? Of being a teenager, that you sort of start thinking about the social aspects of it, and I was probably curious to learn how the world runs on the social aspect as well. Um, so yeah, it's not sure whether there were I don't know, any childhood experiences that sort of made me more curious about it.
Mm.
Um, Probably nothing in the childhood that I could think of. But
Mm.
maybe it was, just always being curious about the surrounding world, and naturally, at some point in your teenage years, you also shift your focus to like social interactions, because now it becomes an even more significant part of your life. So yeah, probably general curiosity was the thing.
There is usually the pattern that why people get into psychology because they either want to heal themselves or heal others, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the interest in people, interest in ourselves becomes even more emphasized when we face suffering. Maybe we experience bullying, maybe our loved ones face some challenges. And I think we start to reflect, we start to think, and it can be difficult to make sense of those experiences. So I experienced bullying at school, so I realized that I needed something to grab on to make sense. So
Mhm.
at the time, what really helped was reading like those existential authors
Mhm.
like Camus,
Yeah.
Kafka, Hesse. So that definitely helped. And I think I remember in the 11th or 12th grade, I started seeing a psychologist due to a career crisis. I didn't know what to
Mm.
study. I was
Yeah.
at a loss. So that also really helped. So I think that at least for me, these experiences definitely created that curiosity. But then again, I realized that we don't have to be traumatized to get curious, you know.
Yeah.
So anything about your life, if you want to share, or any major experiences that might itch that need, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. So first, thanks for sharing this. But I would say that, yeah, maybe as we become teenagers, then we start reflecting. Okay, so what we're gonna be doing in society, like we are about to be grown-ups, right? So I think all of a sudden we start getting those questions, and some people are more curious about them, some are not. So, but yeah, now that I'm thinking, I haven't answered the part about why morality.
Mm,
So it's a good question, like why I became so curious about it. Maybe it's the fact that I sort of want to make sure that I'm living an honest life, and I'm trying not to lie, and
mm,
not build my life on lies, and also in terms of relationships. So I'm sort of trying to be the good guy, and
Mm.
Maybe I'm not I'm coming not from the best neighborhoods in town, right? So maybe also sort of reflect that what it means to be a good guy, because it's not that I was surrounded by many good examples,
Mm.
and that I sort of had to uncover it myself. And I also think that my moral probably uh, understanding, right, also comes from a lot of Western Western media, right? Like the good guys always win, so that
Mm.
really I really feel that it's deeply embedded within myself. And yeah, I'm also like a huge fan of superhero movies. So I think
Ah, I
that
see.
yeah, I kind of feel that yeah, these are my maybe archetypes, and yeah, maybe there's some connection here. Like I haven't actually thought
Mm.
about it, but somehow it feels that there might be something interesting here.
But it definitely makes sense, at least to me, because it's one thing. Yeah, so one thing is witnessing those bad examples, let's say living in a not nicest neighborhood. So I'm from a uh, also smaller city. I'm like a post-Soviet child. So when we
Hmm.
became independent as a country, I was born like in and
Yeah.
like what was the year? 1992, right?
Hmm.
So it was like very fresh, and there were a lot of still gangs in
Yeah.
Lithuania. Alytus also, as a city, had their gang. I know that in Vilnius, for example,
Hmm.
districts had their gangs, and there
Of
were like
course. Yeah. Yeah.
fights. You're from Vilnius, right?
I'm from Venice. Yeah.
Yeah. So clients I have who are from Vilnius, they definitely have those like stressful experiences from
Yeah. Hmm.
being outside, around blocks. So here in Lithuania, we still have a lot of Soviet buildings not renovated, so you can get the feeling. Yeah, probably for those listeners who don't know, the famous series Chernobyl, how
Hmm.
is it called, was filmed in Fabioniškės district, which is in Lithuania. Very a lot of those old Soviet buildings. So yeah, so I can imagine this. And then when you juxtapose this to those like superhero movies, you get this two different worlds, where on
Exactly.
the one hand you get what it's like to be a very good guy, and then you get to what it's like to be a bad guy, and then you somehow need to navigate this, right?
Yeah, like I think it really resonates. Like I'm having no chills. So
Oh wow,
it's
okay.
yeah. I think when Soviet Union collapsed, right, and I think like our like parents and the whole generation, they were for them the go-to approach to like the world society work is like steal take something from the job. It's not even like stealing, right? Like you don't
Mm-hmm.
even think this way. It's like take something, lie, hustle, don't pay taxes. It was very much embedded, right, into
Mm.
society. And I was growing up and seeing all of this, and for me it was like, no, this is wrong. I don't want this. And then you sort of start trying to find examples, and it's again the movies, right, probably were something that could at least give us some benchmarks and some ideas how things might look. So
Mm.
yeah,
So
yeah, that
any specific hero that you are a fan of, or heroes,
I'm,
superhero?
I'm probably debating between Batman and Superman. Yeah.
I'm not actually, to be honest, I'm not into all those comics and superheroes, but I remember that there is that debate who would win, Superman or Batman. Was there a fight between them,
there
or
was there
there
was
was?
there was so yeah, Batman kind of won.
Oh,
But I think it's also canonical, like Batman always figures out the weakness, right, and exploits it. So yeah,
and it's interesting actually thinking about this, because Superman, it's like he's abnormal, he's like super
right.
normal,
Yeah, yeah.
whereas Batman, he's using technology and intelligence, right? So,
Mm.
mm.
Also, like I really like this phrase that Batman said in one of the Nolan's movies, that you don't have to thank me. I think when you do a good thing or a good like I don't I think thank you is something that you do as like is something that you would do as a stretch, and then maybe expect some gratitude, because normally you wouldn't have done it. So like it's actually one of our like family arguments. I'm not well mannered, and I might not thank my wife
Ah,
after the dishes, and like she's really pissed about it.
oh, I
But
see.
like when I'm preparing something, I don't expect her to thank me
Mm.
simply because I did this not as a favor, right? I just did the right thing, and I don't
Oh, interesting.
expect any gratitude. But again, like this is I'm more of an exception here, so I know that I need to get a little bit more well mannered and
Mm.
not forget to thank people, yeah, even for simple things.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I guess that's a good place where to discuss the difference between psychology and philosophy, because philosophy, especially moral philosophy, tries to argue what is right, what is wrong, maybe from a more objective side, whereas in psychology, we're looking, okay, so how things make people feel. So, in terms
Mm-hmm.
of gratitude, there's a lot of research that uh, expressing gratitude to yourself, to your partner, to the world, maybe God, if you're religious, increases subjective well-being. So, it from a psychological perspective, it makes sense to say thanks more often and appreciate others. But from a philosophical perspective, then it seems okay. So why should I thank someone if I'm doing the right thing? So people just should do it by default, and it shouldn't be like a favor that we do to each other essentially. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, like
interesting.
I think if you had to compare, like I think yeah, some of our arguments in like with me and my wife are caused by different moral philosophies that
Mm,
we embrace. Like I feel that I'm
interesting.
Kantist, like I'm just
Mm.
trying to do the right
Kant
thing.
is to mean like Immanuel Kant, right?
Yes, like the
Okay.
intentions matter, right? Like not the consequences. And my
Mm.
wife is purely utilitarian. Like if it causes her harm, it doesn't matter whether my intentions were good or bad. It's like bad, like
Interesting.
yeah, like for me, like if I was hurt but the intentions were good, like I cannot be angry about it. So
Mm.
yeah, but I would say that yeah, probably the utilitarians are more aligned with how our general psychology works, and contest is something that is not maybe the most like you need to train a little bit more yourself and be more like reflect on those kind of things.
Mm. You're actually giving me some paranoia because I still don't have kids, but me and my partner are planning to have in the near future. And my biggest fear is to get into these conflicts, ethical conflicts, when it comes to raising children.
Mm,
Because if one is, Kantian and the other is
or
utilitarian, so you still have to have some common ground. And I don't want to put my child in a place where the person has to somehow be forced to make independent decisions and like rationalize what is good for that person
Mhm,
when their cognitive apparatus is still developing. So, but when I was saying this, I thought, okay, but maybe the person has the right, and maybe they are not that childish as I might think when they
mhm,
are growing up. So maybe
yeah.
it's good for that person, for that small human to get different perspectives. So, any ideas on that?
Okay, raising kids, yeah, it's a very tough tough topic, and I would say that I probably had more time to think about it like before having a kid, because then once you have a kid, you don't have too much time to think and reflect on it. So it's like
That's a sad
do
reality.
do as much of thinking and like establishing some guidelines before it, because then later on you're more in the execution mode.
Yeah.
But I would say that I sort of try to follow this principle that you know, at some point I'm not going to be in his life, so he needs to
Mm.
be sort of prepared for it. So, if he falls down, I want him to learn how to stand up. But
Mm.
I'm also there, to support him emotionally because, that's such a big trauma emotionally, right? To fall. So
Yeah.
again, I'm trying to balance, but kids are also very good at like testing the boundaries. So it's I think yeah, it's a very work in progress, and I think if you're as long as you have good intentions and you want to make sure that you're doing best for your kids, I think you're gonna figure this out, even though there's not too much like theory to help you with that. Just try to do the right thing and think long term. Like is it a good thing that I'm doing, and is it gonna help him long term?
That's probably your inner Kant speaking, because as a psychologist, my inner utilitarian is screaming right now because, oh, but Hitler might have also had good intentions, so you can get into these difficult discussions, right?
But I think like as a future father, you just you can also help with discussing things, right? And
Yeah.
maybe you can show one perspective, and at some point you're going to be the main, uh, like the most important influential figure. At some point, it's
Mm.
going to be friends and maybe teachers,
Yes.
etc. So it's like it's still waiting for me that
Mm.
part as well. But I think I'm gonna try to remember how things were when I was
Mm.
kid or teenager, and then think, okay, what is something that I maybe wanted to get from my parents, and just make sure that at least some of the things are gonna do a little bit better than my uh, uh, parents, and hopefully
Yeah.
it's already an improvement, right? Like it's gonna be V2.
Yes, yes. Actually, I take this perspective oftentimes because when we are discussing early childhood trauma or difficult childhood experiences with clients, I always try to help them become conscious of their experience, their parents' experience, and their grandfathers or grandmothers' experience. And when you become conscious of the changes, you see that there's less and less suffering on average through
Mhm.
the generations. So it also helps become us helps us feel more grateful because every generation is at least making something better. So it's like
Yeah.
iterative changes in the generational tree. And I think this gives people some hope and maybe more confidence to them be more better, not better, but maybe
Mhm.
less bad parents, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and previously, it was the previous times where the times where it was maybe you not necessarily had all the food that you wanted to have, or so I think
Yes.
now we sort of have a lot of opportunities and also time to reflect of what is what are our hobbies, what we want
Mm.
to do in our lives. So I think, yeah, like we need to be grateful for as I said, like for all of our relatives, right, that
Mm.
helped us stand on this Maslow pyramid
Mm.
close to the top, right?
Okay, interesting, interesting. Also, I remembered one question what I wanted you to ask when we met before this podcast to discuss what would be the interesting touch points. And I want to tell the story. I just forgot to do that the last time.
Mhm.
So I'm using public transport. I'm not driving a car,
Mhm.
and I was going with a bus to meet with you, and I noticed a mother with a very small child. It definitely was a newborn. I
Okay.
wasn't able to speak, just gesticulating a lot, maybe expressing some vocalizations. And the child the newborn had a toy. It
Mhm.
was a toy smartphone.
Okay.
So it was not like a
Of
operating
course. Yeah.
smartphone.
Mhm.
It's just like a toy smartphone with
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
buttons that you can click that create sounds, and that's
Of
about
course.
it.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and I thought about this, and wanted to ask you as a product manager because I just want to get into the head of the product manager who developed this toy. So
Mhm.
what was like the idea? Okay, so you are just trying what help people help those small humans become more acquainted with phones, or
I think
your user is not the child but the frustrated parent who needs somehow to how to say make the child shut up and give them that toy. So yeah, I was just thinking about this. So any thoughts that you have about this?
if we had to bet, the company is definitely not purpose driven. So they're very much market needs oriented, right? Like
Okay.
if I think the need is simple, right? Kids want their parents phones, and parents don't want to give their phones, so they're looking for a substitute that is screen time friendly. Like
Yeah.
so like, yeah, our kid also got this from I don't know, maybe from grandparents.
Ah.
It's sort of it's a version of pacifier. Again, I'm not that we want to educate the kid how to work with the phone, but it's
Mm.
something that helps you keep your phone close to you. So um but yeah, it's also kids also love mimicking things, and
Mm.
also they want to pretend that they're talking with somebody on the phone because they saw their parents do
Yes.
that, and now they want to repeat that. So again, maybe it's weird that they gave such a toy on at such a young age, because
Mm.
it's just like they're too young, like everything that is clicky or
If I can interrupt you, the child was just throwing that phone. So I think the child was doing the right thing. I think we should
okay,
sometimes
right.
definitely do this with our phones.
No, but if the child couldn't move, like yeah, it was like he wouldn't specifically need that particular toy. Like any toy would suit him. So yeah. But yeah, I think in terms of the product manager, like I think that's another interesting thing that I started doing to sort of reflect and try to reverse engineer like what are the product manager thinking of
Ah,
doing this. So like I'm always trying to reflect on the things that I'm using.
yeah.
Somebody thought even more about how to design certain things, and maybe they'll say
Mm.
how to do some compromises, right?
Mm.
I think in terms of phone, it's some toy that sells well, and they just do it and sounds sell well, So I think
Yeah.
it's a very how to say moral questions agnostic kind of approach.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
just just give something the parents would buy or like.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be forgiving to parents, I guess, or maybe that product manager, when we were kids, it would be basically the same. So you get a toy phone, but just like the line phone. And I guess now the problem is that at that time those toys were quite innocent. Whereas when you think about smartphones, there are also a lot of side effects that you get while
Mhm.
using them. So it's like the same. Nothing changed essentially. It's like different phone because we use
Yeah.
different phones,
Mhm.
but the implications are different. So I guess that's the part where the product managers didn't think
Yeah.
too
I,
much.
I- I'm
Yeah.
trying to think like I hope it's not sort of like a gateway toy to smartphones.
Mm,
It's more that kids wanna it's like bandura, right? They wanna
yeah.
sort of do what they've seen others do, and it might be I don't know, it can be a pan in the kitchen or maybe some
Yeah.
hammer, and then the phone. Like we have to admit, like that's a significant part in our life. So if
Mm,
we want kids to play less with like toy phones, we need to make sure that the kids don't see us, playing with our phones. So I think
mm,
that's kind of they just wanna do what they see others are doing around them. So like me and my wife are always trying like not to be in our phones like when we're with the kid,
mm,
because then naturally he'll want the phone, he'll want to also do that, and obviously the toy phone isn't that fun to look at. So uh,
that's
so
true. That's true. Because we're talking about technology, I think it would be also interesting to discuss how you got into technology,
yeah.
because we talked about your decision to study psychology, your
Mhm,
interest in psychology and interest in philosophy. And as we discussed, product development was not on the radar. It was in Lithuania, especially. It was a
mhm,
new field when we graduated.
mhm.
So if you had just to maybe explore your journey into
Sure.
tech,
Mhm,
maybe share some most important lessons that you learned throughout the path. And I think your story might be interesting and helpful to others who might have similar interest and
mhm.
might consider this niche path to product development.
Okay, yeah. So I think yeah, the times are now way different. Like there are more options to sort of break into product management. Back then, I didn't know such a role existed. But I would say that the transition looked the following. So I was studying psychology, right? And I got back from my exchange semester. I started dating my my future wife, and naturally I started thinking, okay, I now need some money, right? I need some cash flow, and as I was studying in the third year, it sort of I started learning that some of my classmates, they sort of started working on some of the recruitment agencies.
Mm,
So that was, I think, a natural sort of transition. If you're studying psychology and if you want to find a job, maybe recruitment is like it's probably the only best option that you have, right? So I knew somebody knew me in one of the agencies, so she vouched for me. And I think
mm,
yeah, like if you have to reflect, some of my first jobs were was something that I got because somebody vouched for me. So I think
mm,
networking in a broad sense makes sense, not because you want to find the job, but simply because some people know you, and some entry jobs are like really good in that term, because every candidate is equally good, but if somebody in your team is vouching for that person, it's already better than the rest. So that's how I got into recruitment. And also the times were getting different in Lithuania. IT was booming.
What
So
was the year?
I think it was 2007 maybe.
Okay.
Or like, yeah, I need to double check the dates, but I think that was no, it can be 2007. Maybe 11, 10, so something around that. Yeah, it was probably, yeah, after the crisis, because
Hmm.
yeah, then things were starting moving upwards. We just had Barclays in Lithuania. They had a
Yeah.
success story, and we also got like huge injections from European Union. So we, like, people had to develop some systems, and the IT field was also booming. Everyone
Mm.
started getting phones, etc. So naturally, I was, yeah, put to work solely on IT recruitment. I was the first one to do it like full time, not partially on IT. And naturally, you start selling all the amazing companies, to the
And by the way, Adas, it's interesting because why did they think that you are the guy to work with technological positions?
um, I don't want to sound sexist, but I think like um,
Oh, I
the
know you're
CEO at
very
that time
brilliant.
thought, okay, you're the guy, like it makes sense for you to go into technology. Or maybe if I was a girl, or the
Mm.
other one, the need was there. So it was sort of the recent recruit, so it kind of made sense. I showed the interest, right? Uh, but yeah, it was actually funny, when I started my onboarding, I would, of course, like I would like shadow my colleagues who were mostly
Yes.
female. And it was my first week. I had no idea, about IT. Like I barely knew the difference between, I don't know, HTML, CSS, and
Yes.
JavaScript. But when things shifted to the technical questions, right, that my colleague would ask, the guys would always like turn to me and start replying as if I was, the one who would assess them. So yeah, I think that was a bit of a common social bias, but
Hmm.
somehow I got into IT. And I think, yeah, it was exciting times. Like you see some big companies moving in, you see huge European grants being injected into the country. And we also started having our first startups, because it was Practica Capita who was the first one to sort of start investing into startups. We had Vinted, but I think, yeah, Practica Capita was the one who sort of created the ecosystem. And our, like, my CEO was very, like, yeah, it's probably, she was probably one of the best managers I had. And
Mm.
she was like very, she was perfectionist, and she wanted to do everything, really well, for her company, for her client, for our candidates, and for her employees, right? And she was also thinking of way how she can give back to the community. So we sort of also had this nice package for the new startups, that we can offer something, not for free, but a huge discounts, help with a few recruits. So I also, got more involved with knowing how the startup ecosystem is developing.
Mm.
And yeah, naturally, you start selling the companies to the candidates, and at some point you start thinking, okay, like I'm sold, I want to join those companies that I'm selling to others. And yeah, so then I reached out to one of my clients. I hired, I think, 2 or 3 developers for that person,
Mm.
and I asked him, like, hey, can I maybe join your company? And he replied that, you know what, like, there are some things, some problems that we are thinking how to tackle, and your profile would actually be a good fit there. So that's how I joined Deeper. Deeper is the inventors of the smart fishing sonar. So that was a nice piece of hardware, right? For anglers, like a size of a tennis ball, and you would like attach it to your fishing rod. You would cast it into the water. It connects to your phone. It shows you the depth, right? And then you reel it in, and you see, where the slope changes. So that was a very exciting piece of technology. And my first task that I was hired for
To
was
go on fishing
yeah,
trip, no?
yes, but but
Really?
no. The part was that the guys had they just finished developing SDK, and they basically were very curious to see look for like some kind of very interesting integrations with other products. So back then, I was thinking, if you remember, there was this cool feature that if you are on Uber, you could like listen to your Spotify playlist, and that was sort of collaboration between Spotify and Uber. It was one of
Mm.
the few of those kind of integrations, and I thought like, okay, this is what I'm doing. Like we have Deeper that can read the depth, and now we need to figure out all the other products that we can partner with,
Mm.
and I finished this in like my first month, and I everyone expected it. It's gonna take me at least a year, to research the market and establish some partnerships. And yeah, I was sitting close by to the marketing team, and I was also asked to help with another thing that my profile suited well is to reach out to the anglers and maybe the ones that have a YouTube channel, and maybe offer them deeper in exchange of a video. Because back then our CSMO was the one who would like work on those videos, and if it, now that I'm reflecting, like every part was like expensive. You need to write a good script, you need to hire actors, you need to have good piece of equipment, you need to film everything, you need to edit it, and even if you have like a great video, now you need to pay for the audience, right, to see it. You need to look for ways how you can bring traffic to it, and sending single piece that you're selling to some angler who already has an audience, like very high intent audience, and get a video at 10 to 20 minutes just talking about your device. That was probably the best return on investment that you can think of. So like back then we didn't have the word influencer. I think that was what I actually ended up doing,
Mm-hmm.
like influencer managing. uh, but at some point I also realized that, okay, even though the company was like really happy about me doing this kind of more marketing related things, I was far more exciting to discuss how our ice fishing mode could look on the app. I realized that, okay, I really want to be the one who's calling the shots there. So it was very clear to me that I wanna work on software. So then I applied to work at Danske Bank, and I was very lucky, now that I'm reflecting, that I joined the mobile pay team, because it was already like a very special and designated team compared to the rest of the Danske Bank. Like it was sort of like a mini startup. We could have our own processes, and that was also the place where I learned a lot about working under Agile Manifesto and
Mm-hmm.
Jira and everything. And that was the school where I learned the most how to manage my backlog
Yes.
and how to work with developers. Because now I was assigned to the specific dev team, and so I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to two teams. And I really enjoyed this kind of a setup, and I realized that, okay, this is definitely where I want to be, and work on those products. And yeah, at some point I realized that even though I'm working with R&D team, and we're shipping and delivering things, um, I'm still not the one who's like influencing it or like calling the shots,
Mm-hmm.
put it simply, right? Like there was some like business department, and it was a bit of a legacy hierarchy that we inherited from the bank. It was a huge separation between the business people and IT people. And I thought, okay, like it's not what I'm reading, in the recent blog posts of like how the product should be developed. So I understood that I really want to do like a real product management, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then a very interesting thing happened. So there was the first job ad of Wix looking for a product manager in Lithuania, and that was also the year when Trump
First product manager.
first product manager in
Wow.
Lithuania, and that was also the year that Trump got elected.
Yeah, I
So
read your post on this. Yeah.
exactly, so it's like I thought, okay, if that guy can make it, so can I. So I applied, the process was like very long. I think I had like 6 meetings, and
Mm.
after each of them, I felt like, okay, they're definitely going to invite me to the next one. I also remember that for the first one, the guy was sort of like presenting me the product, and he was stopping every 2 minutes and look whether I want to leave the room now or whether
Ah,
we can continue. Like he didn't ask me any questions, right? So I was
wow.
surprised that I passed, but yeah, maybe the product itself was scary, and maybe they had some bad luck with previous candidates. But I was
Mm.
sort of like, yeah, let's go. And the actually one of the part of the process was actually flying to Tel Aviv, and like it was mind blowing. I'm like, it was like it was a huge company, like very well known. Like I as a recruiter, I knew how high their standards were.
Yes.
Like I had some devastated candidates that got rejected. In the final stages. Like they were like really good candidates. Like I wish I had them. For my clients.
Mm.
But yeah, so I felt like I knew that my chances were like super slim. But somehow with each step, yeah, I eventually made it. So that was yeah, that was probably the job that I felt the proudest and happiest. When I received the call that they're inviting me to join. Like I don't care about the conditions. Like, I wanna in.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, and that's how I basically became, I would say, the real product manager.
Mhm. Inspiring story when you think about it. It seems that w- throughout your journey into this particular spot, it seems that at every stage people trusted you and gave you benefit of a doubt. For example, when it comes to people link, you didn't mention, sorry, but
Hmm.
it's people
Yeah,
link,
people
that's the
link. Yeah, people
agency.
link.
Yeah, that's the agency. So it seems that they trusted in your ability to understand technical things. For example, when you think about deeper, it seems that, I mean, you didn't have product development experience nor marketing experience. So there was, it seems, some leap of faith as well. Then Dansky maybe experience worked to your benefit. But then when you think about Wix, so full transparency, I worked as a external recruiter for Wix for a while. So I totally understand the frustrations from candidates, but I'm also quite amazed how some people get into Wix, and
Mhm.
usually it's, for me, never understand what were the exact like patterns, who is accepted, who is not accepted. I understood who will not be accepted. That's the thing. There were certain traits,
Yeah.
especially personality traits, that was like a red flag, and it doesn't
Hmm.
make sense to present those candidates. But when it comes to who is accepted, I mean, there were senior people, junior people, I mean, but yeah, but definitely every single person was very smart. That's definitely the case.
Yeah,
And
I
there was
think we
something about their attitude that was also appreciated by hiring managers. But yeah, but that's interesting. So when you think about yourself, uh what do you think made you a good Wixie?
I would say that yeah, like even that you mentioned, like Danske Bank initially they treated me as like I have no idea how to work with agile and with
Okay,
developers. So it was also like sort of
similar thing, right?
leap of faith. Yeah, like I was always underqualified basically when I was applying for all of the jobs up until Wix. Uh, but I would say that first, I think the general market was working in my favor because none of those companies had like many other good, well experienced candidates to
Mm.
choose from. So I think that everything was sort of emerging and new and growing. So like now that I'm thinking, it makes sense. Like, hey, there's like this new smart talent, that wants to be here. Like he's motivated, he can figure
Yeah.
things out. Let him. Like if you sense that it's something that you can train and it's not going to be annoying, right, for you to train that person, like it makes total sense, as opposed to maybe hire somebody who's experienced but at the same time maybe a bit more rigid and opinionated and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And again, like, yeah, back then there weren't like deeper, like I like if they had to pick if they had to come up with a job description, like I'm not even sure like what would be the label, right? Like who they're looking for, it was such a unique role, and it was
Yes.
always changing and shifting around. So
Yes.
uh, yeah, so I think, yeah, market was working in my favor, but
Hmm.
also, like, I didn't try to like oversell myself. Oversell myself. I knew that I was underqualified, but I somehow wanted to show that maybe there's some talent in me, and like, and I hope I can figure out things quickly, and somehow people trusted in me. So
Hmm.
yeah, I really appreciate the trust that they showed in me, and I hope I didn't disappoint them as well. So
I think that your inner superhero and the Kantian worked to your favor, probably.
yeah,
So.
that's a good insight. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, but you definitely feel when the person is has good intentions or is maybe otherwise. And when I remember working with Wix, there was also, especially when it comes to HR people who were also had a very important role, and I guess still have a very important role. They are like
Hmm.
one of the final decision makers when it comes to hiring a person. So at the time maybe I didn't understand that, but after studying therapy and working as a psychologist, now I understand that the technique. And the technique is basically when you're listening to someone, you're listening to what the person is saying, but you're also listening to your intuition, you're
Hmm.
listening to your gut, you're listening to your body, and trying to feel whether there's something off about
Hmm.
what the person is saying, how the person is saying. And
Exactly.
when you try to come up with a hypothesis and try to test that hypothesis during the interview
Hmm.
and see whether what you're picking there is there's a meat to that. So that's like a core psychoanalytic
Yeah.
technique or analytic methodology. So I definitely respect the Wix hiring managers,
Yeah. So Wix.
HR people included. So yeah, I learned a lot from them.
Yeah, exactly. Wix is very like famous for the fact that HR is like sort of the last step. It and like you said, like there were some like really good engineers that didn't pass the HR step, and for them that was very surprising and unusual, because with HR you discuss your starting days salary, but not something that you can fail, right? Um, and yeah, I think back then it was very crucial for Wix to really pick not only like excellent talent, but
Hmm.
also very good like team players,
Yeah.
because Wix really wanted to basically bring their culture and make sure that it's aligned. Of course, it's a bit unique, right? Like we're a different nation, we're a different country. There are some twists there, but we really wanted to sort of uh, have this work hard, party harder kind of uh, attitude, right? And I think with the first hires, it's really important to nail the person, because they're also going to be the candidates that others will want to join. So
Yes.
so yeah,
A
I
lot
think
of responsibility, right?
exactly. Now
Hmm.
that we have established the good core, now we can be a little bit more flexible on the personality, because that now we have some guardrails,
Hmm.
and it's like easier for you to be part of the culture, because it's
Hmm.
already established. So yeah, now I think it's a bit easier, to pass the HR part.
Yes,
Yeah,
I like
for
that.
Wix.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's very inspiring. And a lot of, how to say, a lot of space for gratitude as well. Because
Mhm.
one thing is doing the right thing. So having the right experience, having the right skills,
Mhm.
which does not require gratitude, as we discussed. But in your case, so not enough skills, not enough experience. So that's quite a consequential aspect,
Yeah.
right?
Now that I'm reflecting, like a lot of people were like trusting me and like investing
Yes.
in me. Yeah, so I have to really be really grateful. Like maybe it's another thing, maybe there were like too many, right? That would always like
Hmm.
teach and invest in me. But yeah, hopefully I'm not too much indebted, like, and eventually I deliver for what I was trained for. But yeah, somehow, yeah, many people really showed the trust, and I'm really grateful for that.
I really like a specific technique popularized by probably Martin Seligman, one of the founders of positive psychology, which is gratitude letters.
Mm-hmm.
So usually it's basically just writing expression of gratitude to someone that you feel maybe made a good impact,
Mm-hmm.
maybe trusted or something like that, and just meeting that person and reading face to face. And at least in Western countries, there are a lot of good benefits of that, because usually it's like it's not something that we do very often,
Yeah.
and definitely it's sensitive to the person who is expressing gratitude, and it's definitely sensitive to the person who is receiving, and
Mm-hmm.
it can be also awkward. The interesting studies that there are cultures, especially for example in Japan or South Korea, where for them it's difficult and it's
Mm-hmm.
very weird to be grateful, because they not necessarily used to in
Yeah.
their culture to express, for example, in family and close relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So, so sometimes when people uh, maybe want this in therapy or in coaching, maybe want to increase their subjective well-being, that's one of the ways how you can do it. And it can even work with forgiveness letters, where sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when we think that someone made harm to us,
Mm-hmm.
it's good to, as I say, to rebalance the harmony in the
Mm-hmm.
universe and just
Yeah.
get back to the person and say, look, I don't hold any grudges. I understand what you did. I understand my impact in that, and let's 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 grow from this and learn something from this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it sounds like I'm preaching. So sorry.
No, no, it's it's definitely the technique that works, and I let's say I'm always thinking, okay, now I need to start doing the more be more grateful, and
Mm,
maybe also like start writing something down. So more now it's
mm,
more about thoughts, but it's also I'm trying to bring this at least to the
mm,
relationship,
mm.
and sometimes crosses huge path of like it doesn't come naturally for me,
Yes.
right? But if I start doing this, then at some point be I might be like natural at this, and I also feel that yeah, it's definitely helping my wife to feel more appreciated, and
Mm,
it, so I think it's good for both sides, for the one who's expressing the gratitude,
yes.
especially for one who's receiving it. So
And another hack that might be also interesting to you or maybe others who are listening is that sometimes gratitude, or let's say forgiveness, should start with ourselves. So if it's difficult to be self grateful, it can be even more difficult to be grateful to others for some people,
hmm
because we have this inner critic who is like very who sets maybe high standards,
hmm
and we always feel that we are not upping that standard,
hmm
so we are not very grateful to ourselves. So we think, okay, so if I had the standard,
hmm
maybe other people also should have the standard, and maybe there's doesn't make sense to be grateful. But when we start maybe how to say, negotiating a lower bar, not to be like bad people or maybe bad performers, but just to be more good enough, not perfect,
hmm
then there's more space for self gratitude, and then there's more space for being grateful to others. So it's
hmm
usually it starts with us, and if it's easier with us, it can be easier in relationships.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think, yeah, like I think the insight is, yeah, like be more reflective, right, on those
Hmm.
things, and be honest, right.
Hmm.
Definitely makes sense.
Okay. So if we now switch a little bit to your job nature, and your job nature now as a head of guild, but maybe product manager in general, I'm not sure if we will have enough time to get a lot of depth from this, but I still want to talk about the difference between various product related roles.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to act as that, not an expert in this, but maybe someone who recruited people for different roles.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely I'm biased by my armchair understanding and my recruiter understanding. Understand that it can differ from you as a professional who knows the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think if we go through those product related laws and maybe just discuss their similarities, maybe differences
Okay.
for people who might be interested in taking a path in
Yeah.
this? So, okay, so if we had like to nail them down, so for me, what I'm interested in,
Mhm.
product manager is an interesting one.
Mhm.
Product owner is an
Of
interesting
course.
one, right?
Mm.
So I think there is some relationship between the two. Then there's project manager. So many project managers switch to
Mhm.
product development. Very rarely vice versa. So
Mhm.
that's my
Of course.
experience.
Mm.
Then there I noticed also program director or program manager. That's
Mhm.
also something I'm not used to. I never recruited such people.
Yeah.
And then maybe anything else, I don't know, maybe
Mhm.
business analyst.
Business
It seems
analyst.
that
Mhm.
sometimes business analysts oftentimes become product owners or product
Yeah. Of
managers.
course.
So it seems
Mhm.
like a natural path. So I don't know, how would you like to
So,
navigate this?
so maybe
Maybe.
maybe let's start with the most confusing one. Like that's the let's say the role set that people are asking most about. So the difference between product owner and product manager.
Hmm.
Um, so I would say it depends between the companies, but
Hmm.
usually when I think the product manager is first, it's an older role. It's something that started in Silicon Valley.
Product manager is an
Uh,
older one.
Sorry, product manager. Yeah, it's an older one. Yeah, it's something that started in Silicon Valley. I think Sun Microsystems came up with this because they realized that like too many people, too many departments on working on the same thing, and like there's nobody to sort of overview everything and make sure that the product is one that the users
Yeah.
experience, right? But if too many silos work on it, it's not going to be great and on time. So I think the product manager is something that you would expect to find in the product organization. Somebody who's working mostly on digital products, something that a lot of consumers are gonna experience, and the product manager's job is gonna be to figure out what are the user problems and how that might be solved with your resources, and also maybe make it in a way so that it benefits the business, right? I would say this is sort of a broad outlook. If you know that there's a product manager, there's probably a product designer, UX designer, working close by, and that the product manager is usually working directly with the dev team to figure this out. He has a specific product that he's looking after, and if you hear somebody, or if you read the CV, right, that the person is a product owner, so the first thing that I think of that person is that their team is very much into agile, and they're like strictly
Hmm.
working under agile methodology because they probably have Scrum Master, somewhere there. And but it doesn't really tell me whether that person has a specific product
Hmm.
or whether he's working with a huge system, whether their product is a self-serve that many users could use, something it can be consumer, it can be business, but still like it's tailored for a lot of users, or whether there's like one client who's like paying for whatever system changes they require. So I would say that, yeah, product owner is more of a, it maybe signals a way of IT team is working, but not necessarily that they have some kind of a product available to many customers. So it's maybe it might be even like that they have one customer, they do some huge system for that customer, but there are exceptions. I think maybe Revolut at some point had product owners to emphasize that the product manager is like really owning the product, like he's really the CEO of it, and he's actually even like the team manager for that.
Yeah.
He needs to hire the team for himself to execute on the product needs.
Mm.
So I think, yeah, it's maybe more of an exception to confuse the people in the market. Uh, but there are also other companies who manage to have both product owner and product manager. And
Yes.
usually the hierarchy is that product manager is above product owner, and product owner is like really close to the team because usually he or she is the person who's working with Jira tickets and sorting through the backlog and participating in
Yes.
sprint planning, etc. And product manager is then the one who's sort of trying to figure out the business needs, maybe check some data, decide on the roadmap. um, so it's more, again, it's maybe a little bit more common banking sector, insurance, payments, something that has, some really complex systems to work with. So you need to have a person that can go low level on like the technical requirements, so the product owner, and then product manager could be something that looks more into the business sort of needs.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen a few companies that have this kind of two level approach. So
So if we stop here a little bit,
mhm,
because I would like to focus on this dynamic between product manager and product owner. So yeah, so from what you described, definitely it's complicated.
mhm,
But I guess the gist or the idea that I'm taking is that due to tradition, product owner seems more associated with Scrum, and
exactly.
it's like a term that was ingrained in the
Mhm.
Scrum guidebooks, and it seems that it's a person who is very close to the Agile team or Scrum team, and that's someone who definitely probably has to have a technical understanding. And I noticed that some companies even emphasize this by hiring a technical product owner, by just trying
Mhm.
to nail down the importance of technical understanding. So it's like, if it's like a, I don't know, a DevOps tool, so I can imagine that the
Mhm.
person should understand Kubernetes, Ansible, all those DevOps tools, and
I
how
would
they
say that,
work. Yeah.
yeah, maybe to like put it simply, product owner is usually the one who's working with backlog on execution. But if
Yes.
you read on CV that person is product owner, I wouldn't assume that that person is actually making decisions on the roadmap, like what
Mm-hmm.
exactly his or
Yes.
her team is going to work on.
Yes.
If I
Yeah.
see that the product manager is applying, so I sort of know that the person can both work with the team on,
Yeah.
on execution, but he or she is also the one to sort of figure out, the roadmap and build
Mm.
a vision and execute on it.
Yes.
I would say that the product manager is looking at the broader scope of responsibilities.
Yeah. One like product manager, vision oriented, and product owner more like tactics oriented, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
very much solution oriented. Again, it might different if
Sure.
there's
Sure.
some company, but usually it's really an exception. You
And
also
I under. Uh huh. Sure.
another one, the technical product owner, product
Mm.
manager. So I think it's mostly related to the platform team. You have a bunch of backend engineers, and they're serving so many product teams, and naturally started having a lot of requirements. A lot of people are approaching, and then they need this person who can help with communication, with building roadmap that serves well so many other teams. So that's why some of the teams are also looking for technical product managers,
Yeah.
technical product owners.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
like
I. Yeah.
like I don't know, the ratio would be like 1 to 6, maybe even 1 to 10 of the technical product owners that you would have in your company compared to the product managers.
What do you mean by this ratio? If you
I
can
mean that,
explain.
for if you have like 10 teams and one
Yes.
like platform, you would have a technical product owner or technical product manager, while the other ones are going to be, product managers, maybe working more on the growth initiatives, maybe more on, the product things. But yeah, it's companies usually have a few, very few technical product managers.
Mm. Okay. I see. I see. Unless, of course, all the products that the company is developing are technical
Yeah,
at the core. So
if it's very like developer oriented product, like if your product is for developers, right, of course, yeah, then it's going to
yeah.
be very technical, the product itself, yes.
Yeah, because I worked a bit with products who operate in the maybe blockchain
Mhm.
field, cybersecurity, whereas like a lot of lower level
Mhm.
maybe programming. So it's, yeah, usually clients would expect the product managers to have some kind of technical background in that field, or at least like good understanding from their previous jobs. So okay, and yeah, and definitely from a career-wise perspective, I also would agree that product manager jobs, at least in the tech sector here in Lithuania, pays better than the
Mhm.
product owner. Naturally, because it's like usually as a product manager, you have more responsibilities. At the same time, I'm starting to notice a pattern which you also discussed, that some companies are using a bit of different semantics. Maybe avoiding the Scrum connotations and
Mhm.
using product owner as a like business owner, some
Yeah.
kind of. So
Mhm.
it's like a company is developing different businesses and they
Mhm.
decide, okay, you will be owning this business. And
Mhm.
what I noticed, it's like a CEO essentially. And
Yeah, so,
and
so
yeah,
I think they're just adding some ambiguity to the job
yes,
market. Yeah, because the first instinct for those who are like who've been around in the field, okay, product owner is agile. But yeah, if you want to emphasize this ownership part, and it's like you need to now memorize the companies that are using this term
yes, yes,
to
of course,
reflect
of
that.
course,
So,
of course, of course. Okay,
but
yeah, that's.
mhm.
Mhm.
No, so I wanted to continue with another ambiguous role, business analyst,
Okay.
because yeah, it's also very. Um, I would say that so in Wix, business analyst usually means the one who's going to uh, help you analyze your data. It's like business intelligence, build a report, run some SQL queries, make sure how we are tracking certain user behavior, etc. It's like business analyst means data, business intelligence, data analysis kind of a thing. But in the let's call it like more legacy kind of a company setup, business analyst is kind of like product owner, but they still haven't embraced the agile manifesto.
Yes, yes,
So
exactly.
my role, like official title in Danske Bank, was actually business analyst. We would like internally refer to ourselves as a product owner because, well, we are doing agile. Somebody needs to be product owner. But officially, I was like a business analyst, and like my main job description was understanding business requirements and translating them into IT solutions or something like that. So it was this kind of uh, inheritance from the big companies that you have like business department and they have some business needs and they have some goals and they are sort of creating this order from the IT department that now we need to have some changes in the system, and then you have this middleman, which is a business analyst in those organizations who are sort of trying to understand those needs and translate them into what exactly the team needs to do. Um, so yeah, I think that has some ambiguity, but let's say when reading job descriptions, especially in Lithuania, for me it's easy. If it's business analyst and I have like this list of companies, I know that they're sort of working, with a team, and it's close to being a product owner. So
Yeah.
I was also trying to explain the differences and like how our landscape of product management looks in Lithuania to my colleagues in Israel. So I sort of I came up with this mantra that business analysts are wannabe product owners and product
Yes.
owners are wannabe product managers.
Yes, that's in Lithuania. That's
In Lithu-
exactly the
yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
That's my recruiter experience. And now, if you allow me to share my own understanding, so yeah, I agree that it can be as you said, and probably in Vix it is as you said. But yeah, I always had this more legacy understanding of business analyst. I always I always in my talent pool, I always try to differentiate them from data analysts, and I hope that business analysts won't take it as an insult,
Hmm.
but mainly because when I thought about data analysts, I thought about people who are strong at retrieving data from databases, like you mentioned, for example, using
Exactly. Yeah.
SQL. These are people who uh, might even lean to the data scientist side and be
Mhm.
able to create models. They are people who are able to visualize data, to
Mhm.
present data,
Mhm.
and yeah, this was like an interesting badge that a lot of competencies would be required, whereas when I was hiring business analysts, very rarely they were required to have like technical data science and mathematics, statistics understanding. Usually I saw them as like business researchers who are like understand the
Mhm.
industry, understand the products, and they research it and they come up with insights and help the, let's say, product manager get more understanding where
Mhm.
essentially the company should go. And in my head, that made things
Mhm.
easier because yeah, it's important to conceptualize pools based on some
Exactly.
kind of criteria.
Yeah. exactly. If you take those companies that are working with like government projects,
Mm,
so yeah, they're gonna have business analysts because they're going to have like a very huge list of requirements, and
mm,
then they would need to break it down into chunks, right? That the team can consume. So yeah, like if it's government, yeah, it's definitely going to be business analyst who's going to work with that feature set.
okay. Okay, and what about, okay, let's what I like now, because we're trying, let's say, to
Mhm,
compare product manager, product owner, then product manager, maybe business analyst.
mhm.
What about product manager, project manager? If you had to compare the two, any thoughts?
Okay. So okay, getting back to my experience in Danske Bank, so we had
Okay.
business analysts and project managers. So the project manager was sort of also kind of like a team manager, but
Oh, interesting.
yeah, so their work was yeah, I think at some point there was also delivery manager, maybe for to have a responsibility for the whole department. But that was basically the middleman who sort of was trying to meet the deadlines and
Hmm.
report and mostly focus on like the execution and like timing and budget and those kind of things.
Hmm.
When you think about the project, project is usually something that's money constrained, time constrained, and now you need to resource constrained, right? And now you need to have somebody experienced in Gantt charts, right? And now that person needs to figure out, do I need to bring more people to meet the deadline? Do I need to, I don't know, do ask.
And Gantt chart, what is a Gantt chart if
So
someone
Gantt
doesn't know?
chart is this, project management sort of tracking methodology that
Hmm.
you have a list of your projects and you have the timeline, and then you have the boxes that are sort of going from left to right, and then you can track whether you're on time. So you plan that you're going to finish something in like 3 months, but you see that this block is delaying, so it's going to push
Hmm.
all the other blocks further. So it helps you to better assess the deadline or when you are at risk of not meeting one.
Yes, yes. And from my recruiter's experience, I always uh, try to, yeah, differentiate project managers, product
Mhm,
owners, because and this is my aspect of differentiation. I realize that usually, and it's just my own experience of going through many different profiles. Project managers usually would work in project organizations that are
exactly.
essentially
Mhm,
basically expertise centers that companies come to them to develop something, and usually
mhm,
it's done with like in calibration with the client's team or
mhm,
client development team, and then the project manager becomes like a, as you said, middleman
mhm,
between the internal team who is developing the
mhm.
working on the project,
Exactly.
and then with the client's team who's also doing something.
Yeah.
And usually it's basically the same what you described. The only difference is that that project manager also seems like a product owner as well in those cases.
To some extent, yes.
Yeah.
But I would say that I expect the project manager. The person is probably has multiple project, and you finish one project, you move on to the next one, and like the projects might be like very different between amongst each other. Naturally, there are similarities. Like if somebody is applying here to be a product manager and the person has experience as a project manager, I I would assume that he or she's probably not working directly with the dev team, and
Hmm.
the decisions are still being made by the client, right?
Hmm.
And he's more of a like informing, like we can do this,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
we it's going to take us a lot of time. So he definitely that person definitely knows how to communicate and how to meet the deadline and how to juggle with the resources. So there is definitely an overlap and like good things that he or she might bring to the new role as a product manager. But I would also assume that okay, now I will need to train him how to really do the product
Yeah.
research well, how to come up with
Hmm.
a hypothesis, how to scope things down, so
Hmm.
there's going to be a gap, and it varies between the companies, right? Like
Yes.
sometimes the gap is going to be really small, sometimes it might be huge. Project
Yes.
manager is very general role, you can find project managers in
Sure,
basically
of
all of
course.
the organizations.
Yeah,
So
but we're talking now about probably,
about
yes,
IT,
IAT project.
IT,
Yeah, good explanation. Yeah, that's important because Agile is also not specifically about software development. Now it's used with developing various other products. So
exactly.
that's definitely, yeah. I try to emphasize a lot with project managers because these are people who are on a constant stress all the
Mhm.
time because they come to the clients have their needs, their expectations, and then you try to negotiate something with them when they don't make sense usually.
Mhm.
Then you have to go back to the development team. These people might have different ideas how
Mhm.
to develop the project, how fast it should be developed, and you're always bombarded by everyone.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a very stressful environment. And I remember or maybe notice that when managers manage to transition to product development or product ownership, their working experience, work satisfaction usually increases. But
Mhm.
then there's a number of very uh, what's the word, tough skinned people who then find it boring because they like that
Yeah.
adrenaline when they are
Yeah.
running from place to place and working on multiple projects, and these can be like very
They
very like
sound like
or
firefighters, right? Like
yeah,
they love
exactly.
challenge. Yeah, I would say that it's like I have a friend who's like a classical project manager. He completes one project, moves on to the next one, and his struggle is that he wants to meet the deadline and like satisfy
Mm.
the client and make sure that the expectations are clear. And he manages that well. But then he sort of needs to really push hard on engineers. But engineers sometimes, are let's say not necessarily receptive of that urgency,
Mhm.
and if you push them too hard, maybe they'll say, I want to leave for another company that's
Yes,
has more places to
exactly.
find.
Yeah.
So it's like a very delicate, he's really trying to find this balance of, like, he has like really great ownership, right? And he really
Mhm.
wants to please the client, and that's super reasonable. But at the same time, he's working with engineers that aren't that motivated, and he has not that many levers that he can pull to convince them. So yeah.
Yeah, and of course there will be people who like this kind of work where someone says what you have to do and how
Mhm,
fast, and they are like factory workers. But
mhm,
some people do enjoy this type of work. They're just pushing code, not thinking too much. Just tell me what I have to code and I will do that. And then there are people who actually want to think about the product, maybe not
mhm,
only from the technical side, maybe on the implementation side, on the business, from a business perspective. And these are like that usually Scrum people who like to be engaged and who like to participate in discussions, who
mhm,
like to have an impact. And yeah, so I sometimes see this problem in companies where, for example, a company wants to transition from a project mindset to a product mindset,
mhm.
and people are used to this like factory, let's do
Yeah.
it,
Mhm.
and no thing, just do, and that's it. And for them it's very difficult to transition to this agile mindset because they are not used to think what the product needs, what
Exactly.
might the implementation look like. Just tell me what to do. So it can be definitely a tough spot to be.
It is, yeah. I think, yeah, yeah. Naturally, it needs to start with figuring out what's the user problem, right? Like even when the clients are coming with ideas, so they have
Mm.
an idea of a solution to their, like, for their employees, or like for their clients, but like, if you really want to shift to being more of a like product company, you really need to sort of hear the problems firsthand from those who are
Hmm.
going to use your product. I think that's sort of the biggest change that needs to happen, and that's something that the product manager needs to sort of lead and bring those problems on the table. And then you need to figure out, okay, how we can solve those problems in a cost effective way.
Hmm. And just also a question, maybe to give some clarification. When it comes to user research and understanding users, interviewing users, uh, just getting insights, maybe doing some qualitative, quantitative studies to what you discussed with the users. What is like the go-to person who should do the research? Is it like product manager, business analyst, any data scientist?
Hmm.
Maybe you can help me understand this aspect of work.
Yeah. So think, yeah, it depends on the type of research. Like if you wanna,
Mm.
get some qualitative research, you would like discuss it with your data analyst or like business analyst, however you're calling this in your organization. But
Mm.
again, you need to sort of present the problem, the rough problem that you wanna validate with data.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be exploratory, like figure out like big problems or like big opportunities. But usually that's also, the risk as research, because they might not find anything interesting for you, and it's time consuming. So it's always better to have some hypothesis in mind. But I think the most insightful ones are actually interviewing users, like having those one-on-ones. I think it varies between the companies. I recently read this article of what product managers and UXers expect, like what's their responsibility. So it kind of feels that both assume that they need to be the ones that are talking with users.
Ah,
In Wix, it's like we're saying that it's like part of product managers' jobs description to talk to users. There are some organizations have even dedicated user researchers. Like
yeah.
that's a standalone role, and like that's one thing, that the main thing that they're doing. Um, I would say that if you want to be a good or great PM, you definitely talk to users, because like even if you look at the reports made by UX researchers and they might create some video snippets, it's like you still need to hear the story end to end,
Yeah.
of the person. You sometimes get questions that you want to clarify with the user. Like you essentially in the team, the product manager is the one who's bringing the user voice, like the problem,
Mm-hmm.
explaining in user words, like I'm as a user, I'm trying to do this, but or I have this problem and I'm trying to use your product to solve this problem, but I can't, like it's missing something. And then if you have a good problem formulation, then you can say, oh, but you know what, maybe we don't need this feature, maybe we need to do this the other way. But you can bring those deep insights only if you really understand the big picture for each user, right? Like what are the motivations, what are they trying to do,
Yes.
what's their business, right? And how they understand what's their cognitive model of your product. So I think it's really critical for product managers to be good at that. But I also don't mind that the designers are also talking to users,
Yes.
because I think the more people in your team understand the user or actually are users of your product,
Mm.
the easier it is to make the decisions, because you have a better picture of
Yes.
of the problem landscape.
Yeah, and I totally understand this overlap because, at the end of the day, when we're talking about UX, UI product designer and UX, UI product manager,
Mhm.
so both have to have some understanding of UX, UI. Maybe designers usually they are good at UI,
Mhm.
whereas product manager is not necessarily good at building designs or something
Mhm.
like that. But still, if I remember correctly, product manager would create wireframes, which is kind of a proto
Yeah.
design. So
Mhm.
there
Mhm.
is that collaboration, and I think when those two people work as a team and help each other without trying to play power games, it's
Yeah.
usually the best results. What do you think about
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. I would also say that here, or even in other companies, there is a very, let's see, a significant overlap. Like the most significant overlap for PMs is with designers.
it?
Like uh, it's always a question of who's going to do the rough wireframe. Because designers
Okay.
don't like product managers, doing the wireframes,
Ah,
because maybe sometimes it's too detailed, and then
okay.
depriving them of being more creative about their
Exactly.
approach. But then for product managers, it's a good way to communicate to the team, because one picture is more powerful than thousand words. So it's I think like even in Wix, it varies a lot. Like some teams would do that. Product managers drawing the first wireframe to sort of communicate the idea of how we can approach this problem, and then designers take it from there. Some teams are like not even, some product managers aren't even touching Figma or any other tool, and just talking with a designer, like what's the solution might look like.
Hmm.
So it really depends on the product, on the team setup, and also how skilled the product manager is, designer is. So it really depends. Like even I, like in with one of my teams, I was sort of the one to start with the wireframes and then hand them over to the designer. And then in the other team, I had like more designers. I was also team manager, so naturally I would like give away more sort of a product responsibilities to the
Yes.
designers, and they really appreciated that. So I think it's a discussion, and we need to figure out what works best for the team. And that's only the wireframes, and there's user talks, and I think both can talk to the users, and that's perfectly fine. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and you know what I'm getting is a strong insight that uh, I think that it's important for product managers to be very flexible with their job descriptions, because
Exactly.
these are people who are like jacks of all trades
Hmm.
almost. And there's some understanding of business, some of the understanding of data, some understanding of design, a lot of some understanding of team management as well. And
And
I
it
think
varies.
that
Like it varies. You might be very good at data, and maybe you're very good at design. And
so that's when we are comparing specific people.
yeah.
But if we are taking an ideal person, usually there has to be some understanding of every single topic. And then what I mean by flexibility, I think it's important for product manager to realize, okay, so what talent pool surrounds me? What can I
Mhm.
outsource? What I can share?
Yeah.
And just be someone who's not like too much attached to one's role and say,
Mhm.
okay, so as you said, okay, I have and this team has many designers, I
Mhm.
should definitely include them. Or maybe in this team I have this talented person,
Mhm.
it seems there's hunger to do like more product work, maybe I can
Mhm.
share something. And I think that's like the master of product manager, having the ability to know where to outsource and how to include other people who are more experts
Yeah.
in their fields. What do you think about this?
Yeah, so recently I remember listening to Lenny's podcast. Like Lenny is a very famous. He has a very famous podcast for product managers, and
Hmm.
one of the guys there shared that he's seen many great product managers because they were like really good in like one field. It can be data
Hmm.
analysis, UX, but like not all of them, or like not being
Okay.
general in all of them. Because I think if you're really good in one field, then you can sort of lead that area, but then you can you have
Okay, I
other
see.
people in your team that are experts to sort of counterbalance your maybe weaknesses.
Hmm.
And that this way you can sort of have very productive discussions and make sure that
Hmm.
all of the points are filled in by strong people.
Hmm.
So yeah, like my personal probably preference is design. Like this is where I'm like very opinionated about. And in my recent team, I even like we had the setup that the designer is bringing in the designs, but I'm sort of making the final call of what I think is the most usable and user friendly.
Got it.
And I also know that the product managers that are terrible at drawing things, like. But I also know that it's not like mandatory for you to be really good,
Hmm.
or like even decent, right, at design, as long as you have other strengths, right, that
Hmm.
and some people can cover you on those weak spots.
Hmm. Yeah, these are like, it seems two different approaches, where one approach is about, okay, you have at least one area
Mhm.
expertise as a product manager
Yeah.
and then share others.
Hmm.
It seems like that's the Lenny approach,
Yeah.
if we can say this.
Lenny's interview. Yeah.
Yeah, from Lenny's interview.
Yeah.
And then it seems where I guess I was coming from is that, okay, I don't think that I'm an expert in any of those.
Hmm.
I have fundamental understanding, but the thing that I am expert of is empowering people and trying to use their talent to their fullest, instead of like pushing something and trusting their expertise.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I believe that when you're doing this, when you're trusting those other players,
Hmm.
they become more creative, they innovate more, they share
Hmm.
more, they do more. And
Exactly.
then it makes your job easier. And essentially, you are becoming like that father or mother who's just trying to negotiate between the people, but then eventually make the final decision and take
Yeah.
take responsibility. So, but I'm not sure, maybe that's not how it works in the real
No,
world.
I think what you like what really makes sense is I think as a product manager you need to know a little bit of everything, but
Mm,
to even like keep up with the conversation, right? Like you need
mm.
to understand the high level architecture of your of your product. You need to know a little bit of UX, a little bit of data. The more you know, the easier for you is to talk with your teammates, right?
And
So
understand their experience and
exactly,
struggles as well. Yeah.
exactly. Like you can. It's not that you want to like blindly trust them. I think it's
Yes.
I really encourage to sort of ask questions and challenge each other, and you need to
Okay.
build your own a little bit of expertise to be able to do so. But it's also challenging in a way to better understand how you're arriving at your decisions. And even though I remember like it was always sort of my go-to mantra when discussing with developers, that even if I'm challenging your like technical decision, it's not because I don't trust you, but maybe you're basing your decisions on some assumptions that you think are like product assumptions. But I might tell you that, well, if you thought it's important, it isn't, right? And we can sacrifice that. But we need to have this conversation, right, to
Mm.
maybe discover those. And it means that I need to at least have a rough understanding, so that I
Yes.
can keep up with the conversation.
I totally relate to that, and that's actually uh, something that a good coach or coaching psychologist
Mm,
do, because usually there is this saying that a coach is not an expert in the field that you are coaching the person on. So if, let's say, a manager comes, maybe a product manager, and is discussing some kind of technical challenge where there is need for more learning, more awareness,
mhm,
it's good if I have some understanding, if I can follow the terms, and
mhm,
if I can follow the plot. But it doesn't mean that I cannot challenge the person,
mhm,
ask open questions, and help the person navigate that dilemma or that lack
mhm.
of understanding, supposed lack of understanding. And
Yeah.
usually, what happens after a good coaching session, usually the person has an idea what they want to do, how they want to do it. Maybe they have a plan where they can get that knowledge. And usually, yeah, I'm not an expert, but I'm just facilitating a conversation. And I think for a product manager, it's even easier because you have this understanding. And yes, it can be in your way and you can become biased, but
Mhm.
then you can pull back and say, okay, I might be challenging too much, but what do you think about this? And make this like a
Yeah.
coactive experience, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's important to sort of build the trust, and
Mm,
it might, if you immediately start challenging your teammates,
mm.
and let's say others might perceive it as like you don't trust us, right, or
Some
something like that.
hostility, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's and like let us do our work well. But
Mm,
I think it's important to sort of like discuss about that, before the accidents happen, right, and sort of establish that that we challenging is good. I think every PM knows that every decision that you bring on the table, like everyone is going to challenge them. The extras are going to
yeah.
challenge them. R&D is going
Yes.
to challenge them, not on the implementation even aspect, but like, does it even make sense of doing
Yeah.
that? Maybe like the problem doesn't even exist, right? So
Mm,
I think it's fruitful discussions, and it needs to be it needs to be a two-way street. The team
mm.
can challenge product manager on the product decisions, as well as the product manager should have a right to challenge on technical design
Yeah.
decisions. And i I think yeah, like this you need to establish an open environment, so that it doesn't come off as not trusting others. It's more about being curious and trying to understand, so that you can maybe discover some assumptions that maybe weren't necessarily
Yeah.
necessary. Yeah.
What resonated with me, Adas, is when you said that it's important to build trust and not jump into challenging too
Mhm.
fast, because that can be perceived as maybe not trusting our people, maybe some hostility. And that's like almost the same in therapy or coaching. You're trying to build a positive alliance and a positive relationship, and positive in the sense that the person feels safe to explore and
Mhm.
share and is not holding back. And if I'm challenging too fast, and maybe just saying that it doesn't make sense, so yeah, the person can close down and avoid sharing. So when
Mhm.
I think about this, I think it's important to realize is that we sometimes think that we need to create an environment where people are open to being challenged. And I think it
Mhm.
makes sense, but no one is talking about how to create an environment where you actually understand what the person is saying.
Mhm.
And in psychology, you never assume that you understand of the meanings that the person attaches to what they are describing.
Yeah.
And you don't assume that you're having the same image that the person is having. So it's oftentimes, especially in his existential therapy or
Mhm.
existential coaching, you ask, what does this mean? How do you describe it? So give me a picture. How does it
Mhm.
look like? What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
And then when you get a better understanding, maybe shared understanding, it's much easier to challenge because you are less challenging your cognitive perception, you're challenging what the person was saying actually.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think some people, yeah, they jump to that because they think that, okay, I understood what the person said, but no, you didn't understand. You're just
Mhm.
assuming that you understood. And then you are basically having a pointless discussion, whereas you just can't sit. Okay, so tell me how you understand it, be curious, and maybe when you're ready, just then do the challenge. What do you think about this
Yes,
framework?
it also really depends on the person, you know. Like
Mm,
I would say that I am usually sort of testing the waters. You see that, you know, some people, they don't mind being challenged. Some are like very offended by it. So you know that, okay, I will need to work more and start small, or maybe even give some room without challenging, so that, you know, maybe there would be like some post learnings, and then you can challenge, and then you can establish, okay, maybe it's fine that next time we're gonna discuss things beforehand. But yeah, I think it really varies between people, and it's also, you know, it's communication. Sometimes you understand person better, sometimes not. Everyone has their own biases or like past experiences, and everyone had some colleague from before, you know, that
yeah,
really annoyed them. So you really need to understand that you aren't triggering any of those memories.
exactly. Yeah.
So you need to, you know, you need to build a relationship, you know, and you know, establish, like, find a place where you can agree, right, on certain things, and then,
And
you know,
disagree on others, right?
yeah, exactly.
Mm,
Like it's, and you know, it's people talking to people, and people are different, and it's easier. Sometimes, you know, with one set of people, it's easier for other set of people to communicate, and yeah, I think practice makes it perfect, right? Eventually,
mm,
you're also reflecting about it.
yes.
If if your intentions are good, you know, you wanna make sure that you ship the right product with the reasonable scope in mind, right, and with a good enough solution. So yeah.
My final question would be, because we had 2 hours of talking,
Yeah.
any like learnings or takeaways from this conversation that you might think afterwards and maybe would like to nail down?
Okay. So I'm definitely intrigued. Yeah, I haven't actually reflected that well why I decided to study psychology, why I got curious about the moral psychology, moral philosophy. I think that's definitely an interesting thing, and something to discuss with my wife. Maybe it's a good bonding exercise, right? And yeah, it was also very interesting to reflect on this journey, and I maybe haven't even realized how appreciative I should be for people that believed in me. Um, you know, I always thought, okay, there was a good chance I somehow managed to achieve that, but you know, I'm only one participant on this two-sided story, right? And there was always somebody who showed some trust in me. So yeah, so thanks for showing me those other things.
Thank you, Alice, for your appreciation. It's definitely a case that I like these conversations to be useful not only to the listeners, but especially to the people who have this conversation. So I definitely learned a lot about product development and managed to update my understanding of those roles and what does it entail. And it's always great, to update your knowledge. And because I'm not working like as a recruiter, it's like a privilege as well. So definitely thanks for having this, for coming here. There were questions that we did not manage to discuss, maybe certain moral dilemmas. So I think if you're interested, maybe in the future we can have
Sure.
part two. Yeah.
Of course. Looking forward to it. So yeah, it's been
Okay.
my pleasure, and yeah, I'm really happy that I was invited to your show. So yeah, thanks.